I hope that that did not disappoint. Um, for those of you who were not here during the pre-stream chat, I was suggested ways to improve my production quality. One of them being that it needs to feel like a crowd is here and they're cheering, and I'm about to go live as if it's a rock show. So I hope. Okay, Char was saying that was awesome. Awesome. Yeah. So welcome everybody. Right now I'm going to refresh the page to see how many pages of pre-stream chat there was. Oh my goodness, 14. Anyway, if you're just now getting here, you're actually on time. We opened the chat an hour beforehand, just in case people are here. They can kind of filter in, but I don't think we ever expected it to be like the level of conversation that it's become. But I mean, it's a really great time to talk and chit chat back and forth. And I mean, we talked about a bunch of interesting things, the production quality of the stream, also like getting into CG in general and how it's kind of a red pill, blue pill situation where it's very complex. And so if you get into it, you got to get really into it, or else you're going to kind of bail and not go very far. So anyway, we talked about a bunch of other stuff, but one thing that I like about the pre-stream chat and what it's become is I'm always very nervous about going into a stream. And so this helps take the edge off getting to know you guys. And it's been a lot of fun. All right, so anyway, I'll see what I can do about actually ramping up production value. I mean, I don't know about pyrotechnics because I don't think my house would last much. But we do have a new webcam. I convinced Wes to get me a new webcam because the one on my display was pretty terrible. But anyway, small steps. Today we are in week 2 of the BC2-1803 class, which is about creating stylized characters with Blender. I've seen a couple new people pop in here, and we're excited to have you. Welcome to week 2. It's okay that you missed week 1, I suppose. That was a little bit disconnected, whereas week 2, 3, and 4 are all very much connected and along the same goal. But week 1 is more. Was more like getting what was the term? Getting loose, like getting into the mindset of stylized characters. So if you missed it, that's all right. But please stick around for weeks 2, 3, and 4 if you can. So awesome. This week we're going to be talking about character development. But as I learned with the last class, I tend to like to start each week by looking backward at the previous week. And so that is what I want to do first, and it's to commend my favorite homework submission, which was from Matthew Ulray, the Jerry Seinfeld. I'm not sure if he's in here. We have 2 other Matts in here, but I'm not sure Matthew Ulray is in here. But this one to me was a quintessential caricature. He hit all the right features, and I just wanted to give a shout out to Matthew for this work. It was. I mean, I was drawn right into it right away from the expression. Like because I was going to do Jerry Seinfeld last week before I did John Goodman, and I was just going to do kind of like a normal smile, more of a neutral kind of subdued expression, and for Matthew to go straight to a hysterical laugh. Like, I mean, we only know of Jerry Seinfeld because he's a comedian, so even the pose and the expression points to a caricature of the person himself and what we know about him. So even that took it a step beyond. The teeth, the humongous teeth. I mean, recognizable. That's the first thing I saw when I saw your post. And yeah, it's just an awesome caricature. The nose. Also, the fact that you'd have so much reference. I wanted to commend you for that because you have multiple angles, you have multiple ages, you even have different expressions, and it leaves very little to chance as far as like the decision-making process. Like there's very few gaps to fill as you're sculpting. And so that's a really good example of using reference effectively and the volume of reference. Compared to if you only had like 1 or 2 images, you got a lot of gaps to fill. So good job with that. I did, if you are here, I was curious if you could answer about this thumbnail right here, which looks like a caricature, sort of a sketch. And I was wondering if you did that yourself, or if you grabbed it somewhere online, because if you did it yourself, that's pretty awesome. That's an awesome approach to, like, if you have those skills of illustration, to draw a caricature first and then translate that to 3D. If you found it online, that could be considered cheating, I suppose. But regardless, like this looks unique to what you actually sculpted. So I was just curious about like when I saw that in there. But anyway, it's just a great caricature, and really impressed with the work that you did here, Matthew. Also, some honorable mentions from Cody Winchester, his Ian McKellen. I'm pretty aware of Cody's work. I think he's been in one of my workshops before, and so I know that he's a talented artist. And I really like what you did here with Ian McKellen. You focus right in on the right features, and I love the hair. Also, the huge nose, that's unmistakable. The big ears, kind of being an older person in general. You know, he's got those big features. And also, you went the extra mile to add particle hair, to shade it, to light it, to do a finished render. So that was 2 thumbs up from me. Also, Mahomesy, your Terminator, I love to see the progression. You posted 2 different images, 2 different stages. And at first, you were on the right track, but everything was a little bit muddy. And so I wasn't sure if you were going to take it further. And then when you did, you applied the notes, and it really turned out well. And you also went the extra mile by adding hair, textures, shaders, and a final render. So I love that you just focused on the jaw and the lips. That to me really characterizes Arnold Schwarzenegger, especially in the Terminator films. And then finally, I think it's humongous. What we now know is Emma Watson, your caricature, but a lot of us thought it was Kristen Stewart. And I think it was because of the front 2 teeth. That's a very Kristen Stewart type feature. But either way, Emma Watson, K-Stu, like it turned out really good. I love the texture quality that you put into the face. It really helps to sell the overall caricature. So yeah, I wanted to mention the work that you did, and hopefully inspire the rest of us. But yeah, it was really cool. In general, there were a lot of good homework submissions this week, and I had a good time seeing those filter in, looking those over. And a lot of you, I really want to commend also the fact that you took notes that I gave, and or that other people gave you, and you applied them. And yeah, it was just this good back and forth improving together. And I appreciate you doing that, rather than sometimes people can get defensive and it goes south. But really, thumbs up on the accepting, receiving the feedback. So overall, really great week. We had like 27 submissions, which I'm surprised about, given that this is an advanced course, and I thought that there would be fewer. But let me see if I'm missing anything. Okay, Matthew just got here. So Matthew, you had the favorite homework submission. So good stuff to you. My credit card says Lord Humongous. Okay, I'll remember that's what the L stands for. Awesome. Okay, there are, as far as week 1 recapping, there is one thing that I wanted to cover, a loose end of sorts, where I felt like one note that I was giving a lot was like to push the features more into the exaggerated spectrum, whereas I saw several that looked almost like one-to-one recreations of the person that you were trying to sculpt. And so it was too close to reality and wasn't exaggerated enough. So I asked for Kenny Q, I asked for your Mr. Bean file, because this was a really great sculpt. You had the features really well formed. It looked like Mr. Bean a lot, but it looked too realistic. And so you went back and addressed some of the notes, but you also shared that you didn't quite feel like you knew how to get the exaggeration that I was talking about. So I asked for your file, you gave it to me, and I spent a little bit today trying to exaggerate it. So I wanted to show you that real quick, because I gave that note to a lot of people, and hopefully this will be applicable. So yeah, I got your file, and then just going to hide my OBS real quick. And then I created a shape key to be able to switch back and forth. So this is what you gave me, and as I drag up the exaggeration, we'll talk a little bit about what I honed in on to push it a little bit further. And this is not a perfect caricature. I spent like a half an hour or whatever. You probably spent a lot more time looking at his face, but a couple features that I noticed, one, his eyes, like he's well known for having these kind of bug-eyed peepers. And so I wanted to push that further, even though I do think you pushed that a little bit further than reality. It wasn't quite noticeable. I wanted to push it a lot further. And so I spread them apart a little bit as well. And then I noticed that in his expression, it seems like there are areas that are like pulling upward as he like opens his face, and particularly the corners of his eyebrows. You can see that the wrinkles here show that, and also the nose being pulled up. I don't know if I can do it, like just being pulled up and out of the center of the face. So that's another thing I tried to emphasize a little bit more. And then also pulled out the smile a little bit farther, because it's a very extreme face, and just pushing that smile, I think, makes sense with the expression. But I don't know, maybe, hopefully it looks more like Mr. Bean in a caricature sense, but just trying to illustrate more the notes that I was trying to give. But hopefully that helps and makes sense. Still, like, this is a really, really good sculpture. This is one of the better, like, anatomical sculptures that I saw this week. So really good work overall still. But I know the point of the exercise was to try and challenge everyone's comfort zone into like exaggeration. Hopefully that was helpful. I don't know if Kenny Q is here, but hopefully you'll see it in the recording. Let's see. It looks like there's a question. Is it possible to have a good sculpting workflow with a mouse? I heard most people use Wacom tablets. Sorry, I'm new to sculpting. Hey, that's all right. That's a question that comes up, I think, often for new sculptors, and it's never a bad thing to go back and address. But so I use, actually, during these changes on Mr. Bean, I used a mouse for 90% of it, just because it was mostly moving things around. And so I find that the mouse is more precise than my specific pen tablet, my Wacom tablet. And so I will use it for movement, but not for strokes. For all the other brushes, I tend to use a pen and tablet. The pressure sensitivity is a big plus. It's not required, and some people do sculpt with a mouse. Some people in here, okay, Kenny, you are in here. Awesome. I'm glad you are. But some people do sculpt with a mouse. There's someone, I think, let's see here. I want to say, I'll show you this example real quick, but let's see. It was one of our recent gallery images, and it was an incredible character art piece. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Ooh, there we go. Here it is. I heard that this character was sculpted entirely with a mouse and not with a pen and tablet. So anyway, this is an example of what is possible without a pen and tablet. I recommend one. I mean, they're not that expensive, and or you can get inexpensive ones, and I find them very important for my personal sculpting, and most sculptors do it with a pen and tablet. Okay, cool. So that was kind of tying up a loose end of some of the notes that I gave last week, and this means we can finally get into week 2, which is about character development. That's kind of, I changed the title around a little bit. Oh, also, Omar, thank you. You're asking a question, and you are adding the prefix in all caps question. That will help until we can get a better system developed, like a question queue. For now, if you can put the question in all caps, that helps me a lot to filter through just the linear chat for when you guys have one. It's a little easier to find than just looking for a question mark. But from Omar, how can I learn to do characters, study real human anatomy, or just start drawing stuff that I like? How can I start to learn to do characters? Well, hopefully this class will get you into that realm. I mean, real human anatomy, we're going to be simplifying human anatomy, but if that's your question, more like how do I get better at real humans? So for me, I've never taken it upon myself to really learn human anatomy, like the scientific names of human anatomy, memorize muscles and bone structures. Some people do that, and that's fine if it works for you. I just find that boring and tedious, and I just find that like repetitive, like creating multiple characters over the course of time, like just is the best practice. And so that's kind of my recommendation. I don't think there's any fast track to anatomy, sculpting anatomy super well. for me, it does boil down to just like study a human body and then create what I see. I know that probably doesn't help that much, but I personally have never found it super beneficial to memorize anatomy, and like memorize names and the structures. It's just easier for me to study an image and then recreate it. So I'm sorry, that might not be a great answer. That might not be the way that you learn, but I'm most certainly going to do a realistic character class at some point. We've got a course on it, which I'm sure you're probably aware of, Omar. But anyway, that's always a topic that comes up, anatomy in general. So it's something that we definitely want to hit multiple times. And so, all right, I think I've got the questions. Oh, wait, here's another one. Do you have more fun doing stylized or realistic characters, and why? I personally have more fun doing... I think now I have more fun doing stylized characters, and some of this will come through in the discussion today, but for a long time I was like realism exclusively, and that taught me so much about computer graphics, about life, about how the world works, especially visually and scientifically with light and shape and things like that. So that was fun and it taught me a lot. But I do tend to think of realism as a little bit of a box, a little bit, whereas stylized character, like sky's the limit. It's just such a loud voice for you to express yourself visually through a character, and there's so much potential in that. And so it's a bit of a newer thing for me, but stylized characters, I think right now have the potential to be more fun. There's a little less pressure with realistic characters, because if I'm doing realism, like I got to hit some standards, like the skin shading has to be really, really good. The pore detail has to be spot on. Like the standard of realistic characters is through the roof. And so you have to do so much work just to, like, I think, be considered among realistic characters. And that's fine. Like, I mean, we should improve that way. But like, it's so much work for less payoff, in my opinion, in my experience. But if realism is your thing, trust me, I absolutely understand that. And it will teach you a lot. And I mean, there's a lot of VFX work out there that requires realism. So it's not a dead end or a bad thing to pursue at all. So a question from George: what workshop is this? Is it from a course? It seems like we've got several new people in here, maybe who have not ever been in a live stream, or maybe aren't aware of the course, the class format. But to answer your question, this is called a class, and it's only the second one that we've done. But it's an effort for me and for us. Hopefully, other people will be doing classes. But it's an effort to kind of connect the various features of CG Cookie. Like we have a community forum that's meant for people to interact together and share their work and critique each other, and kind of learn together. But then we also have courses, which are pre-recorded videos. And sometimes the problem with those is that as soon as they're released, they're stuck in time. And so they can, software can advance and kind of leave behind some of these courses. Even though the information's really good, you've got some like button names changing, or small parts of the software changing. And for me as an instructor, it's like it's so much effort to re-record that thing right now. Once it's super obsolete, yeah, absolutely. But like all the information's still very, very relevant. It's a lot of effort just to re-record a course if like some of the button names are different, or like there's a new tool, but that doesn't actually affect the workflow, stuff like that. And so with the class, we also incorporate the live part of teaching, which, we have an interactive chat for you to ask questions directly, get a quick answer from me. And so like combining all those in a class format, we take advantage of the community thread. We have a foundation of pre-recorded courses, and then the live element. So like if you get disconnected in any of the courses, like from an older version of Blender, like you can ask me and I can steer you in the right direction, hopefully sooner rather than later. That's kind of what classes are, and that's what this is about. We're in the second week. They last 4 weeks, so kind of monthly. I'm thinking I'm going to do every other month for a class schedule right now. But that's kind of what this is all about. So the specific topic for the month is creating stylized characters with Blender. And it is an advanced course, so you'll do best if you have prior Blender knowledge of modeling, navigation in around the application, and also let's see what I say, sculpting. Kind of you have an intermediate knowledge of those things. So anyway, I feel like it's been 20 minutes already. We haven't even gotten into the lecture. So let's get started then into the character development, which is what I want to point you guys towards for this specific week. Because it is an important week out of weeks 2, 3, and 4, where for the next 3 weeks, the goal is to take a 2D piece of concept art and turn it into an authentic 3D representation, 3D model of that concept art. And this is what I think an important skill. It's what I did professionally for several years, where I'm not responsible for creating the character from scratch, like coming up with the whole design, but I am responsible for translating it into 3D. And so there is a career potential for this. I also get it in freelance a lot, people asking me to create their characters and stuff. So it has potential professionally. But I also know that some of you there's actually several of you in here trying to design your own character, like draw it and then create it in 3D as well. That's beyond the scope of what maybe I intended. But if you're passionate enough to do that, absolutely go for it. And you'll also get hopefully some tips within this lecture about that design concept. And so week 2 especially is important because I think it's where the most creative decisions are made for the character. Because week 3 is like retopology and making it conducive to an animation pipeline, and then week 4 we're gonna look at texture painting. And so this week, more than next week, is like where you make your creative decisions that the character comes from and that shapes the character so strongly. So that's why this week is important. And I think talking about design principles is going to help us here. And so with that in mind, we're going to have a question to consider, that how do we make compelling characters? Hopefully we agree on this. I know that a lot of you maybe want to just create your own character that you came up with, and you're not so much thinking about other people, because compelling, implies that other people are compelled by the character more than just you. But hopefully we can agree that that's what we want to do. We don't want to make bad characters or forgettable characters. We want to make compelling characters. And along with that question, why do we remember some characters more than others? These are questions I want you to start thinking about and analyzing a little bit. Because certainly there are films, there are characters all over the internet that some are forgettable and some really stick with you and keep you coming back for more, either from that character or from that artist in general. And this one is personal to me, this question. Is there more to it than just, quote, make it look cool? For the majority of my life, my only metric was if I thought it was cool or not. And that worked okay for me. Like, I was, I guess, a standout art student in my little small town high school and stuff like that. But once I got into the bigger picture with better artists and start working professionally, into college, like learning professional skills and sharing my work, that's when it really started to set in with me that me thinking it looks cool isn't really enough for everyone to think it looks cool. Now, I shouldn't say everyone, just for other people to be compelled by it. And I do want to connect with people with my characters. Some of it sure is like approval. There's that element of being an artist or doing anything. You want, as you succeed, you want to be affirmed in that. But like, we don't want to be slaves to like what other people want. Of course, like that's not the idea. But I do want to connect with people with my characters so that they are compelled. And so I realized that just me making it look cool did not mean much to other people. Maybe a handful, but not in general. And so only in the last few years have I really realized that and taken it to heart. And that's made me want to study what does make characters compelling and how can I apply that to my aspirations, my own creative ambition for characters, so that it can connect with more people. That's kind of, I guess, the thing. And finally, you might be thinking, well, I'm not really here to be a character designer. And that's absolutely fair. We're not really going to be character designers after this, but I think we all will. Our character art will do better if we are at least aware of these concepts enough to speak a little bit of the language and consider them. Because as much as I honestly would love to be able to create, like get my pencil and create a character from scratch, I've done this enough years to admit to myself that it's not something I have a knack for, and it's very difficult. It does not come naturally to me. And so I'm not a character designer, but I do understand enough of the concepts and the principles of design so that it can positively affect character creation in a 3D sense. So if you're not here to be a character designer, that's totally understandable. I would want to challenge you to at least be informed enough to be aware of the concepts. And so moving on, like with that in mind, the word I kept coming down to was story. And because a character cannot exist in a vacuum. That statement changed over the past couple days for me as I was making this presentation. It started out soft, like maybe a character shouldn't exist in a vacuum, but now I think like they cannot exist in a vacuum. No matter what, no matter the character that's created, there is a reason for that thing existing. There's a reason for the clothing it's wearing. There are reasons, and it's beyond just what you see. And so that's what I mean by a character cannot exist in a vacuum. Specifically, the character needs to be considered for the role it plays in the narrative or the plot. That's one way. A character's background and history, things that happen to the character to shape who they are. Those things are super important to a character. And the overall purpose of the character, why we're creating it. Are we creating it as part of a short film, or as part of a video game, as part of a TV show, as part of a children's book, a web comic? Like there's a purpose to every character that's created, and the more whether we think of it that way, that is what's happening, I would say, and the more mindful we are of that, the more what was the word I've been using? The more compelling that character will be ultimately, and so that's kind of the three things that I want to look at. A few characters that we all should be familiar with, and let's see if there's anything else I wanted to say about this. I don't think so. I should probably speed up anyway. All right, so the first one, I am going to use characters from hopefully well-known movies. That way we all kind of know about the character and can look at it, having a familiarity with it. And this first one is Disney's Kronk from Emperor's New Groove. This is by far, I think, the funniest character in any Disney movie. He cracked me up, but that's kind of beside the point. Hopefully you guys have all seen the movie, and let's see. I see a question real quick. I'm at CG Cookie for Learning Blender, but they have those concept art courses. Maybe as well do some of those, because why not? Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because in week 4, part of the curriculum for that week that I would like you guys to watch is to pick a concept art course, because the painting principles that Tim teaches are absolutely applicable in Blender whenever you're painting in 3D. Color picking, color blending. The tools aren't named the same, or it's a different interface, but the principles of painting absolutely apply. So yes, if you're getting into stylized work, I mean, in general, like it's going to be helpful to know painting techniques. And I'm more aware of that now because I typically photo source textures. But I mean, in preparation for week 4, I'm going to be practicing, painting techniques. So yeah, they are useful for sure. Okay, so back to Kronk. So what do we know about him? His purpose to the narrative. He is the primary villain's henchman, right? So he's not the primary villain. He is the sidekick. He is meant to help the villain, and he's simple-minded, right? We know that from the movie, and that serves really well as a henchman to do whatever the main villain wants, and he serves really well at that. He's huge, so he's like got this intimidating factor, or at least he attempts to be intimidating, even though he's really like a big teddy bear. But these are stereotypical features of like a henchman, a villain henchman. And then, so like we see all these features that are everything we've described, except for the intimidating. Yeah, the intimidating part. Everything we've described are not visual things, right? The fact that he is a henchman is not visual. The fact that he's simple-minded is not visual. Being intimidating is not necessarily visual, but they are all manifested visually in the character design. Like his muscles are physically huge. His head is physically small, representing simple-mindedness. And we talked a little bit about this particular trope or character style last week with the policeman. I used a very similar approach. And I love this next image because to me, like, it represents a lot of that simple-mindedness where his neck is huge, massive, and it all tapers very smoothly to the tip of the head, which is the smallest point. And I just think that's a really good design choice for representing the simple-mindedness that is Kronk. Yeah, so we getting some good Emperor's New Groove stuff in the chat. That's awesome. I can't. Yeah, this character is freaking hilarious to me. I love Kronk. But let's go on to the next one, which is another Disney movie. Hopefully, just connecting the dots. Disney is obviously very good at character design. They have a big reputation based on it in a lot of ways. So I'm just using that. There are other characters that are designed very, very well, but we might not all be aware of. So anyway, Disney's Jafar. That's another villain. He's Aladdin's primary villain. There is a serpent theme throughout Jafar that's manifested visually, but also, well, he becomes a snake at the end of the first one. I forget why, but he becomes this giant snake. So there's a serpent theme running throughout, and serpents, we should all be generally aware of the symbology of a serpent being deceptive, being sneaky and cunning, and shrewd, kind of, those type of things. Like a serpent is representative of that, and we see that in the character Jafar, how he goes about his business in the film. He has this beak nose, which I don't know if it's universally thought of as this, but I at least think of it as kind of a harder character, like a more negative feature of a character. Like you don't see many heroes with this beak nose situation. So the fact that he's got a beak nose and a very long face, it's perfect for him looking down his nose and his face at everyone else, kind of thinking he's better than everyone. And that is definitely present in his character in the film as well. The sharp and pointy accents, right? His staff comes down to a point. The goatee, swirls down into a point. The shoulder pads a point, and it all kind of lends itself to this prickly nature. Like you don't want to touch Jafar. He's kind of dangerous. And then finally the colors. That's another powerful way to invoke impressions from character, from visuals. And so we have red, and you can simply Google like red symbolism, the color red, symbolism, and some of the keywords that I focused in on were rage, anger, danger, malice, passion, all things representative of this primary villain, and a lot of primary villains. And then finally black, which represents fear, authority, death, evil, aggression. So this one's pretty obvious, like the design elements involved. And they all create a very memorable character, in my opinion. Very compelling, and he served as a very good villain in the Disney movies. And, oh yeah, Scar, absolutely, another great one. I mean, there's so many. I could spend all day going through characters. It's a really fun kind of exercise. But I mean, you should do that too. Like as you watch your movies, consider these design elements. They are intentional. That is for sure. So the final example is Pixar's Carl and Ellie. So get off the villain bandwagon and let's look at some primary, good characters, let's say. And so with Carl and Ellie, one of the standout features is he is kind of square and angular, and she is very round. And I love this image especially because they even carried that over into the furniture that they sit on. Like this is Carl's chair, which is very square, and Ellie's chair, which is very round. And that's just very intentional. It's kind of super obvious once you notice it, but it's just a decision that they made to identify the characters. Also, the color, Carl is more reserved with khakis and whites. He does have a yellow shirt, which is something I'm going to hit on in a little bit. But compared to Ellie, very bright colors, very saturated pinks, purples, reds, and yellows, and more adventurous color scheme. And if you remember the movie, like that was a key part of the montage where Carl was reserved and kind of a shy kid, and Ellie like snuck into his room and like got him to do all kinds of stuff as children, like stuck into the room and got him to do all kinds of stuff that he wouldn't normally do and use his imagination. So they represented those two ideas and they got married and they merged together. And then as we go on into the film, like Carl, he loses Ellie and then he's kind of becomes this old, let's see, grumpy old man. And I think his features become even more pronounced, like the angularity of his ears compared to here. Like there's angled like over his face, but he's also younger, but they're not quite as sharp. They're a little softer. Where compared to this, like the angles in his ear are just that much sharper. His jaw comes down and forms a very sharp square shape. Also, the laugh lines as they come into the mouth and kind of this, general subtle frown, like that's a super sharp line. So the angles are emphasized as he kind of, dwindles into a grumpy old man, and his colors get even more reserved as well. They get even more conservative. They're brown. They have barely any color to them. Brown, black, white, and like grays. And so this also is a support, I think, in the film where when he gets started, when we first get to see Carl and the movie really starts after the montage, like he's just a grumpy dude and stubborn and doesn't want to move his house. And these elements of the narrative, these unseen elements of the narrative manifest themselves visually in the character design. So that's really the thing that I want you to take away is that what goes into a character is much more than just what you see. Like it's the background, it's the purpose to the plot, and those things can manifest visually. Then they can work together. They don't have to be separate, and they shouldn't. If we want compelling characters, they shouldn't be separate. So that's really what I want you to get out of this. I hope that that's landing with you guys. Again, like I was taught all this in college, and a lot of it I was like, okay, this is a little hippie. I don't know what I thought back then, but it's questionable, like to analyze characters this way. But I mean, once I really started respecting it and saw it more and more, it gave reason to why characters are more compelling than others. And this isn't a science. Like this is very subjective. Like I'm sure a lot of people hated Up and didn't care about the design. It wasn't compelling to them. So it's not a science to where everyone will like your character. But thinking about these things, I guarantee they will push you into a more compelling realm with your character art. All right, so finally, that's kind of theory. Now let's try and apply that to the character that I'm going to be creating, which is John Dunn. It's part of the K9 concept contest, and this was at one of the submissions. And Matthias Melli, he gave me permission to use this art, and I'm really excited because I think this character is really cool. And so what we do know about the character is, and if you're unaware of the contest, this will kind of fill you in a little bit. Tim he came up with this gang idea called the Battered Bunnies, and where rabbits were, part of the theme, and they were very punk-like, if I remember, like neon colors, and whereas there's also like blacks with like the studded accessories and very punk-like. And so then he came up with a contest to create their rival gang, which was K9. That's the name of the gang. And so they're not opposite, but they're very opposed in their design elements. And one of the key ones is this sophisticated aesthetic that we see here in John Dunn, where he's wearing a suit, and not only that, but like kind of a trendy like suit. It's not. It looks like he cares about how he looks. And he's got nice leather shoes on. Also, the sophistication of the weapon that he uses compared to the Battered Bunnies, they use like bats and blunt weapons, whereas he's got like a rapier. So that's just kind of higher class weaponry in a sense. He's got like a man purse on. So he's just in general much more sophisticated in his aesthetic. And the K9 themes as well, meaning like the K9, that's not a species, it's a category of like animals, so foxes, dogs, coyotes maybe, I don't know, that kind of thing. You can see his hair has a very clear fox sort of representation, kind of like a Wolverine a little bit, but they're more fox ear like. He's got obviously the mask he's wearing, which is cool. It only covers the one half of his, or more like 3/4 of his face, and it's got like a fox beak on, or fox muzzle on it. So yeah, those themes are there, and the sharp, pointy accents again, like the hair is pointy. His muzzle even comes down to like a sharper point than an actual fox. The sword element, obviously, like these to me give that same prickly kind of sensation to where, he looks sharp, but not someone I want to really hang out with. Like he's still a member of a gang, and they kind of do criminal activities, and then one that we'll come back to is the bunny mask here. There's a whole story behind that I want to read to you guys, but that's also this element of danger and like don't mess with me. And then also the fox. I forget about this feature, but the fox, who's his like little sidekick accent visual element, has a dead bunny in his mouth. So really a lot of layers to this character, and I can't remember if they won or not, but it was my favorite by far out of the competition. And so with that, okay, so this gets into the one of the assignments for this week, and that is to write a background for your character. Let me see if that's my next slide. Okay, yeah. And I want to go and read the background that comes with that character, John Donne. But first, let me see if I'm missing any questions. Could it be that he's wearing part of a human face? Oh, that's interesting. Like, I didn't think about that, but you could say that he's a fox character, with a fox head, but he's wearing a human face. That's interesting. That turns it up on its head a little bit. I don't see any big question prefixes. So I don't think I'm missing any questions. Again, yeah, if you have one, Omar, so it is K9. Actually, it's technically KAY 9, a number 9, I believe. But maybe he's like a Ninja Turtle, but a fox. So yeah, if you guys have questions, again, just a reminder to put the big question prefix onto the statement, onto the question. All right, so I wanted to read through this story, this backstory that Matthias wrote for this character, John Donne, because it's what I want you to do for your character this week. So I'm going to read it right now. John Donne is an American of Irish descent, and his parents moved to America for a better life, but it was tough. And Irishmen weren't accepted in the new social environment, and he was often bullied and discriminated against. His father became a criminal working for various mafia gangs, and he became infamous for it too. John did not exactly know who his father worked for, as he was often away from the family, moving from place to place, trying to keep everybody alive. And it was when his father died that he was introduced to the K9 Gang, a criminal organization that consisted of professional and dangerous people of crime. John inherited his father's position and was trained at a young age. And he grew to become a loyal member of the pack, and it didn't take long until he gained a respectable position within the gang. And this is a cool detail. Actually, we're getting there. His job is to scout and collect information about other gangs in the cities. But most importantly, the battered bunnies is his main target. It was the bunnies that murdered his father, and they have been looking for the rest of his family ever since. John did not take the death of his father lightly and wanted revenge on the person responsible for it. And he got it. He got that bittersweet of, well, let me try that again. He got his bittersweetness of justice and carries the murderer's mask with pride as a symbol of strength and endurance. I think that is pretty cool of a detail for this battered bunny mask on his belt that he wears, and it's the sign of dominance that first of all, that the fact that his father is killed by the bunny gang, I think that adds some drama into the story and also makes you relate to him. I think a villain that's relatable is crucial, and that's what it does for him, in my opinion. It makes you kind of feel for him and relate to him wanting justice in that way, but it also makes him kind of a badass for going and killing the murderer and taking his mask and wearing it as a symbol. So anyway, that's only 3 paragraphs. It's not a ton of information. Like when I say story, I don't mean like a novel or a short story or something, but just 3 paragraphs about details of his life that go into explaining who he is. That makes such a more compelling character, and that's what I want you to do this week. Whether you're drawing your own concept or you're grabbing one off the internet, this week I want you to write 2 to 3 paragraphs about your character. Make it up and just have fun with it. Get into the mind or get into the world rather of this character and just start giving some details about him. And And that's the goal. I really do want you to have fun, and it's really not even for us to know, for you to share and for us to know about the character as much as it's for you to get into that world yourself so that it can inform how you create the character. So that's the assignment. That's one of the assignments. And let's get into talking about week 2's agenda. So the goal is to develop a story for your character, one that can fuel your creative workflow for the rest of the month, and then channel that story into the conceptual stage of sculpting. So that's kind of the abstract goal. Specifically, the training to watch is Sculpting the Wrangler. And if we look at that course, you can find that under Blender 3D courses. And what we do is it's just a general workflow in Blender for taking a piece of 2D concept art and authentically creating that just with sculpting inside of Blender, trying to be very authentic to the details in the image, lining it up over top of the concept art and getting it as close as possible. That's a general workflow for that. And then also chapters 1 and 2 of the Intro to Character Modeling. If we take a look at that course, this is by Jonathan Williamson, and it similarly takes a piece of 2D concept art, though this has like a turnaround, like a front, side, and I think a back, and let's see, front, side, and 3/4 too. Whereas the Wrangler is only a 3/4 shot, and so it's also like in the Wrangler course, it's teaching how to fill in the gaps, when you don't have all the other information drawn for you. Where this one's more straightforward, you can model it directly off of orthographic model sheets. And but he also goes through the whole process: sculpting, retopology, and preparing for animation. But the first 2 chapters, let me just remind myself: modeling base shapes and then sculpting. Yeah, and so that's kind of what I recommend for this week, just chapters 1 and 2. Okay, so that's kind of your bedrock of support as you go throughout the week. Like, lean on those courses, but also don't hesitate to ask questions of me in the community thread or other people. All right, so the homework assignment: write a background for your character. And so I got a little. Let's see. What I really mean to say is write a background for your character that's 2 to 3 paragraphs. I updated this on the syllabus on the community thread, but I did not do it here. So what I'd like to see is a background of 2 to 3 paragraphs or 200 to 300 words. But if you want to go longer, if you really get into it and you end up writing 2 to 3 pages or something, like, that is fine. That can only be a benefit to your character creation process. But we probably won't read all those pages. So if you do that, share it as a Google Doc and with a summary at the top, because I would like to see what everybody's kind of thinking. But yeah, if you can do that, that would be great. Again, this is more for you than it is for us, for you to get into the mind of that character, that world of the character. And then finally, we're going to conceptually sculpt the character. And what I mean by conceptually sculpt, this goes into what I learned working at Real Effects, and that is, typically there's an art department, and they give you a piece of concept art very much like this, and you're asked to create it in 3D. Well, as a 3D modeler, that this is going to be for animation, so you need to put it in T-pose, you need to make the face neutral, you need to translate this pose version into a neutral version. The problem is, if you show that to the art director or to the concept artist, they're going to have a hard time connecting those 2 dots. And the approval process could unnecessarily be, confusing. And so, like, what the people I worked with, what we learned as a modeling department is the first stage to get approval, we need to just sculpt a concept sculpt of the character exactly how we see it in the artwork. Like, I'm going to sculpt him in this pose with his, hand on the weapon. I'm going to sculpt it exactly like this. That way, when I show whoever gave it to me, I'm using the professional scenario, it's going to be much easier for them to make that connection and be like, yes, this is exactly what I wanted to see in 3D. And once they give the okay, then we can do the technical job of neutralizing him for the animation pipeline. So that's what I'm going to do, and that's what that's what I challenge you to do as well. Anyway, we'll get to that once we get to it next week. That's kind of the context of the workflow. And so that's what I mean by concept sculpture. This week, and I'm going to sculpt it, and I'd like you to sculpt your characters exactly how you see them posed. I guess that also implies that your concept art is posed. If it's not posed, then just do it neutral like you see in the art. But it would be great if you guys did get some really, compelling art that is posed, and then you can sculpt it exactly how you see it. That's the whole point of the homework, and that's the big part of the homework to submit. Let me see if I'm missing any questions. Okay, yeah. Where do we share the doc and sculpt? So not in the gallery. Actually, if you just want to post it to the thread, let me see. In the community. So everything to do with this class it revolves around this community thread. It's going to be pinned to the top. So BC2-1803. And here, when you submit homework, it's just posting to this thread. And if I jump to, if I jump to like something that actually has a page that actually has homework, the format's pretty simple. Let's see. Oh yeah, so this is, wow, here we go. Typically I like to see at the top a, like homework, week 1 homework, and then like in bold, and then either some sentences to describe your homework, anything you want to share with us about the process or anything like that. And then usually an image, maybe if it's a Sketchfab embed, you can do that. And that's a submission, just posting to the thread. And so if you're going to write 2 to 3 paragraphs for your character, please just post that in quotes on your reply, your submission post, and then also paste in your image for your sculpture. Or if you want to put it in Sketchfab, you can do that as well. That's kind of the submission process, the expectation. This week's sculpt will be a challenge. Yeah, it will. It will be for me too. I'm kind of doing this along with you, and it will be challenging, and hopefully that's good for you guys. But all right, cool. A neat Clint Eastwood. That was a second sculpture, a second caricature by Mal Holmesy. So that's pretty cool. And that's it. I believe that's the end of our presentation. Yes. So now we can actually start to get to work. It seems that it's typical for like the lecture portion to be an hour, and then the next hour will be the demonstration. And for the demonstration, I'm going to be getting the concept sculpture started. Julian, it still should be stylized, right? Yes. As far as, kind of everything we're doing is stylized. So your concept art, ideally that'll be stylized, and your sculpture itself will be stylized. Cool. Let me jump over to Blender and we'll get started on the demonstration. So I'll be honest with you, I did not find the time to actually rehearse this. So you're going to get the raw workflow. I've done this a bunch of times, so hopefully that works for me, but I have not rehearsed this today, so it might be a little rusty, but it'll be raw, and hopefully that's not a bad thing. Let's see. It's trying to catch up a little bit. Looks like, okay. 2 last questions in the time, actually, but it's okay. Can't has a lot to play with live streaming. Oh, okay, that's not a question. All right, what I have set up in the scene already is a camera with the artwork attached to it. Now, I thought this was a little bit of a way that I could save some time, because an hour, frankly, is not a lot of time to do much on a sculpture. So I wanted to save a little bit, and I do go over this process in the the camera setup and attaching your image is done in the other courses, so I didn't want to repeat that here. But if you have any questions about it, I can answer them. Let me show you what I have done. In order to get the camera set up, I created this little cube, and I changed the dimensions so that first of all, I went to the units and I changed it to imperial, because we use in the States feet, inches, that kind of thing. And so I changed him to be 6 feet tall, which is kind of an average adult male. And then the other dimensions were 1 foot, so I can clearly see that this is a height measurement. And then I set up the camera with the artwork to align to that perspective, so that this cube basically represents the height of the character. And this is how I, aligned the character to the art, and I'll be able to reference this camera angle along the way, so that I can ensure that I'm getting an authentic character representation in the sculpture. Question: Would we get into trouble by getting someone's work off the internet to make the homework? Yeah, I guess that's something I should have addressed. I honestly don't think that I don't think there's any problem because you're not, I mean, as long as you're not going to try and sell your model or something, like there shouldn't be that's not what this is about. This is all educational. And so if you are worried about it, like go ahead and reach out to that artist, find who they are, reach out to them and say, hey, I'm, taking a class about 3D modeling and I'd love to use your concept art to create the character from. Is that okay? I've never run into someone who said, no, that kind of thing is not okay. So I would, it shouldn't be an issue. And besides, like, I mean, it's best to ask it's respectful to get their permission, but like legally, I don't think there's any trouble whatsoever with choosing a random image online and, oh no, sorry. Were you, man, I'm sorry. Were you asking that question a bunch, Omar? My bad. But yeah, I really don't think there's any issue. If you're concerned about it, someone else in the community thread was concerned about it. Just, ping that artist and see. Generally, like, yeah, anyway, I don't think that's going to be a problem. Just make sure you don't sell anything. This is all for educational purposes. So, yeah, it shouldn't be a problem. Okay, great. And well, I mean, with that, one last thing I'll say is I would maybe recommend that you grab someone's from off the internet because there's a better chance that that's going to be a higher quality than if you do it yourself. And I think the higher quality the concept art you use, the better potential your character has to be. If you use bad concept art or not great concept art, then your character probably will, like the ceiling is going to be not great. Yeah, totally. Like people are even excited. Yeah, that's more the reaction I've run into when I ask people, "Can I use your art for this?" They're usually like, "Oh, that would be awesome to see that in 3D. Yeah, please do use it." That's just been my experience. My brother, who's also a 3D artist, that's his experience too. All right, I need to start actually getting work done if we're going to see this thing progress. So my typical method for sculpting this character is for sculpting characters in general is to use the skin modifier. And I just want to take a moment, since I haven't rehearsed this, to make sure to think through the process if that is the best way to go. With the skin modifier, I'll be able to get the character into a pose very quickly. I will lose symmetry. So, an alternative is to sculpt it neutrally so that I can, get the left arm and the right arm for free. Do the left arm and get the right arm for free, kind of the mirror, the symmetry benefit. But then I'd have to pose it. So I think I am going to use a skin modifier and just try and quickly get to a posed version as soon as possible. Yeah, that's another thing about the concept sculpt is this is not the final sculpt. This is not the final version, so I can loosen up a little bit. I can be more gestural and not feel the pressure of like needing it to be a perfect sculpt. Awesome. Okay. I'm just going to delete this cube. It was only there for setting up the reference. And now I'm going to add, typically I just start with a plane and select everything in edit mode, Alt-M, at the center. So I have just one vertex. And from here, I will add in the modifier panel, a skin modifier. Okay. And you can see that it's this cube, housing around our vertex. It's a little too wide, I would say. So selecting the vertex, Control A, I'm going to just bring in the diameter of that cube. That's kind of a contradictive statement. Yeah, that should be something a little better to start with. I'm going to move this up to be kind of the pelvis in edit mode. And then start to just trace out, by extruding, hitting E, trace out the form of the legs. Just the basic form so far. So we have, like pelvis to knee to ankle. And actually, I shouldn't have had them come from the same vertex, I don't think. Let me add another vertex in here, hitting Control R, and then sliding the vertex up. I'm just going to move that out a little bit. There we go. Then move up the spine. And I'm going to hit E, Y. Ooh, no, X. Oh, whoops, I didn't realize. So I've actually set this up. Typically, I like to have the front and back of my 3D world be the green, the y-axis, but I've set this up to be in the x-axis. So just some of my workflow assumes that x symmetry rather than y symmetry or that kind of thing. So I'm going to actually fix this real quick. I'm going to add the way I like to fix it, empty plane axis, and then select everything in the scene, Control P. Rotate this 90 degrees, negative 90. There we go. And then Alt P and clear the parent and keep transformation. Then delete that. Whoops. Oh, because I didn't clear it over here. There we go. Alt P. There we go. All right, so now it's oriented the proper direction. Let me Control A and apply the rotation though. Okay, now it's fixed. All right, so I've got this started, the extrusions. I'm gonna now extrude out in Y to represent the foot. And I need to add a subdivision surface modifier because the skin by itself is too broad. It's too simple, it's too polygonal, and I want it to be a little smoother. Let me see if I'm missing any questions. What was the difference between Control A and Alt S for the skin modifier? Alt S. Oh, Alt S. So Alt S, it's in the skin modifier. I don't really use Alt S, but in a mesh situation, like if I had this vertex right here, Alt S, that pushes the vertex along what's called the normal. So if I enable, let's see, face normals, this is kind of the direction that the face is pointing, or that a particular face is pointing at. As I move it up, you can see that the normal changes, it averages. But Alt S is what pushes along the normal direction. Okay, so that is very different from in the skin modifier. Control A is basically increase the thickness of the skin modifier around this vertex. So here you can see that I'm making it smaller, which I want to do for the foot. Control A will make it smaller, but also I can do Control A and do either X or Y. And now I'm shrinking it in one direction. Okay, so Alt S Y. Let me try that again. Not Alt S, Control A and Y. You can see that it's just shrinking along that direction. So that's really useful in the skin modifier. Doesn't really have anything to do with Alt S. And then for the other foot, all I'm trying to do is kind of roughly align where the feet are and the orientation of the character. And I think this foot is way too long. So let's just move it back by doing the slide. Whoops. My ankles are probably much too thick too. So let's start bringing that in. Yeah, once I get a general form down and placement of the joints, then I can start to shrink their size. But one thing to think about is my feet are supposed to be flat on the ground. And so as I move if I start to move down like this, according to the artwork, and I think it's probably going to be hard for you guys to see. If I start moving down, that's actually going to break through the floor. And so I want to be mindful as I pose this. Yeah, like this foot is not even on the floor. So let's scale it down using the cursor, since that cursor is on the floor. It's really a bummer that it's rotated. Let's see. Is there a way? Does anyone know? Is there a way to twist the skin modifier? Like, can I twist this around? Nope. Whoops. What is that? That has something to do with texture coordinates, doesn't it? Oh, bummer. What is this? I accidentally pressed Shift T. Does anyone know what that is? Sorry, I know I should be the instructor, but I've never seen this before. I mean, at least it's been years. What is Shift T? If anyone can tell me, that'd be great, because that's super annoying. What is Shift T? Translate? Oh, edit texture space. So that is texture space. How do we turn that off? Oh, here we go. So I think it's the display. That's the texture space is just always off by default. Shift T equals wireframe. Yeah, okay. So that's off now. Anyway, so yeah, I was just trying to talk about how to keep the feet flat on the ground. Shift C will return my cursor to the origin, meaning the grid as the ground. And so I just want to be mindful of keeping the feet flat on the ground when I'm looking at this view. And so if I want to basically just try and keep the points on the ground by using Shift Z. Whoa, Shift T is bad. So G, Shift Z, I can move this all around and it's going to stay flat on the ground. So that's kind of the point of that. Control A, Y. Did anyone figure out if there's a twist for the skin modifier? Huh, anyway. All right, so you've noticed that I've been basically moving all of my points according to the art, and that's great until we start looking from another angle. Here we can see that obviously this is not making any sense. It's not making three-dimensional sense. And so we need to consider how to move around these points so that they make sense in 3D as well as in the artwork. And let me think about how I want to do that. Like I need to move the back, the top of the spine. I need to move that backward in space because right now it's just sort of planar. So I need to move that back for one. Maybe move this one back a little bit too. And it will help if you if you had like a mirror and you could look at yourself, like act out the pose yourself from different angles, and that will help you get a understanding of what should be, turned around, what should be manipulated. But I think the knees need to come. Actually, maybe not. This is curious. I was thinking the knees would be sort of locked, but maybe they're not. One thing I know I need to do is add more edges in here to match the silhouette better. So if I add a vertex in here, Control A, well, I actually need to scale these down. There we go, that's looking better. But, okay, so in here you can see that the bend of the leg, that needs to be accounted for. In fact, maybe two of them. Just cut in two new edges. There we go. But look how bad that's broken. This leg, the weight is just not distributed properly. I'm checking the chat to see if there's anything I'm missing. I think you were saying try rotating it. Yeah, you can't rotate these points, unfortunately. I could have sworn there would have been a twist function. So I need to really think about why this leg is not working. So what I'm going to do is just try and make sense of it outside of the context of the art. Like, what would this guy need? Certainly spreading the legs further helps. But, it's further. So what I'm doing is kind of moving it not only left and right, but also backward in space to try and get it closer to the art, but also so that it works in 3D. That's better. Still a little broken though. Now I'm kind of wishing I had rehearsed and figured this out previously, but I don't know, maybe it's okay. Maybe once I get the other limbs, it will feel balanced. Maybe. All right, so let's leave it like that and start to get the rest of the body. So I know that just from human anatomy, like I'm going to extrude two verts out like this to represent the shoulders. And then this time I think I'll build the structures out a little bit before I start to position them according to the art. And so I'm just creating right now the arm that's kind of wrapped around his body. I'm going to stop there. And then we don't have a lot of information about the other arm, but we can kind of gather the orientation of his arms, of his shoulders, would probably place the other shoulder about here. And then the arm is going to be like that. I do think that that makes the most sense. Just put a skull beneath the foot and it will look natural. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. All right, so this one, let me see. Something like this. All right, so now I've got the geometry in there. Well, might as well add the head while I'm at it. Okay. All right. So now I've got the rest of our body shapes in there. Let's try and make it match the artwork while also making it match and make sense in 3D. So yeah, this shoulder I need to bring up this direction. What about the other arm? Where is that? Right here. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Man, this pose is much more extreme than I realized when I first chose it. I thought it wouldn't be a big deal or wouldn't be difficult to figure out at all. Does that look pretty natural to you? Does he feel off balance? This leg right here is still bothering me maybe a little bit. But I don't know, now that I see the whole body, I might be convinced that it's okay. I'm gonna try and bulk out his chest a little bit. Huh. Whew, the geometry is busted up here. Let's try and dissolve that. Move his hip forward to balance him better. Oh, okay. So you're saying move this forward like that. Let's see here. It might not be a bad idea. Question, should the weight bearing legs hip be higher? Oh yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, you're right. That should be higher. This one should be lower. Yeah, that's a good point. Because just the, like if you stand up and you kind of lean to one side, yeah, anyway, that's just a good point. It probably makes sense to everybody that should have happened. But yeah, that's a good tip. If it's not terribly visible in the skin modifier, then I'll definitely be sure to emphasize that in the actual sculpt. But with the skin modifier, we are getting some bad geometry, so I need to try and fix that. Yikes. And that's probably not the answer. Okay. Let's see. It might help if I select all of these, go to my modifier, and then where is the button? Skin modifier, mark loose. What about just this one? Mark loose. Okay, that does not seem to be doing what I want. That's a shame. Wow, look at these errors, man. Holy smokes. Let me look at some questions. Matt Curtis, I think the bend in the spine should come more from the shoulders than the hips. The bend in the spine should come more at the shoulders than the hips. Oh, okay. So you're saying that the bend is too strong here, whereas it should be more up that way. Man, this pose is a lot weirder than I thought. Okay, well at this point, it might be something that I need to just stop fiddling with the skin modifier, and I need to just get the geometry to look okay. Ugh, look at that. Yeah, so to get the skin modifier geometry to be okay, I don't know, it's being finicky enough that I think I might need to just apply this and start sculpting rather than trying to make this work perfectly for me. Though the pose does need to be, I don't know, something about the pose is throwing me off, but man, it's matching. Maybe bringing the hips forward is making it a little too extreme. All right, let's go with this. I'm just going to trying to think about the hands. I hate hands. If you guys haven't been watching my stuff, they're just a lot of work for something that no one, we don't focus on that much. But I know that at least this one over here can just be a simple fist, like a simple ball. But then this one is, splayed out, so I got to actually sculpt the fingers. I might just extrude it and keep it as a flat piece of geometry for now. Control A, let's go X. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, so hopefully you can see here I'm just like flattening that out. Okay, let's see here. Also notice how long the forearm is. Oh my goodness. Okay, that's better geometry. Does it still fit? Yeah, okay, that works. Good geometry, and the shoulder's in a better position. Yeah, the pose is, I'm surprised you find this fun to watch, but that's good. I find this tedious. I just want to get to like the sculpting, but yeah, the pose did throw me for a loop, but I do like it. I think that it's a good one, like it's appealing. I'm just, let's see here. I could probably make that a little bit, yeah. So I've got some work to do. My elbows cannot be in the right place. My elbows are like super long, or they're just misplaced. Like look how long the forearm is here. Does that still work with the pose? Yes. I think that's pretty good. Oh, the head, though, is not in the right place. I hope this doesn't mess up my geometry too much. Oh, sweet. It didn't at all. All right, so we've got the pose started. There's going to have to be a lot of work done in the torso region. I know that just because I think that's also throwing stuff off a little bit. But does it feel okay in 3/4 or in the rest of 3D? Looks like the feet were a little too long in my opinion. All right, I think this is going to be good. I'm going to save this as a new file. Concept sculpt number 2. All right. Oh, so we got a suggestion here from Jazz. A big rule of thumb I use when teaching posing a character is to act out the pose yourself. See if it's comfortable. Your character should be just as comfortable as you when posing, and then push from that point to make a dynamic as needed. Yes, absolutely. See what changing the route does. Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry. In regards to Jazz comment, yes, absolutely. You should get up and act out. I mean, I'll just do it right now. You won't be able to see much, but I guess trust me if I. This is kind of funny. So like, yeah. I mean, when I act it out, at least, the hips are the most extreme part of the pose. Like they're stuck out way out there. So I'm thinking that that's going to be correct. Yeah, it's really good suggestion, Jazz. Good advice. Evan, see what changing the route does. Yes, that's another good thing too. I managed to get it to work without changing the route. But like when I was getting those geometric artifacts, like it is another good option. In addition to like mark loose or clear loose, mark a route that will alter the geometry too, and it can solve your issues. So that's another good suggestion. Thank you, Evan. Definitely a process. I'm going to be happy with this for now, and I've saved the file. Oh, look what marking the route did to this down here. That's funny. Let me just Control A. Let me undo that actually. Oh. Okay, there is not going to be any undoing. Control A. I basically just need to invert the values. There we go. Guess I could have just saved or opened the file. That's all good. Everything else looks good. This might be pushed out too far. Oh, you know what? I think it's the hips. The hips are facing directly down the y-axis. So they really need to be rotated around like this. Yeah, and that would push this part of the joint backward. Yeah, that definitely needed to happen. Yeah, rotating these guys around. Yeah, it's going to make things less extreme. Okay, cool. All right, let's roll with it. I'm going to apply this I'm actually going to increase the subdivision. I just like to have a little bit more geometry once I go into dynamic topology. I'm going to go up to a view of 3 and then apply it. Alt-C, convert to mesh. That will essentially serve to collapse my modifier stack. All right, so I'm going to dive into the torso first just because that is such a problem area. Let's see. Why make a sculpt in such a hard to rig pose? Wouldn't it be much better workflow to sculpt in T or A and then pose it or rig it? It's dependent on the context that I tried to paint a picture of at the beginning before I got started, and this when I work professionally at Real Effects, like we would get art like this, and the first stage would be sculpting it exactly how we saw it, and just so that you could capture the full essence of that character. And then you get approval based on that. And then once you get approval, that's when you neutralize the character and make it friendly for animation, basically. And so that's what we did with ZBrush and Maya back then. But like the purpose being giving them a very direct representation of their artwork, meaning the pose. But if I were just creating this character for myself and I didn't need like approval, maybe it would be a better idea just to go ahead and sculpt it in neutral, but you lose a lot of the character's expression and personality when you go to neutral. So that's what I'm trying to avoid. I want to ensure that I connect with that personality as much as possible. I hope that answered the question for you. Anyway, all right, so I've applied that now, and I'm going to jump into sculpt mode. I'm going to use dynamic topology. I usually like to start out with a detail size of 10. This is pretty standard stuff from if you've seen any of my other stuff. pretty standard stuff if you've seen my other stuff. And I'm going to start, I think, with clay strips. And yeah, this will make some of it more difficult. Like, you know, sculpting around this arm, that is going to be potentially annoying, but this is all an effort to try and be extremely authentic to the concept art as quick as possible. That is the whole goal. Because like if I sculpted it in neutral and then I posed it into the character, like what if it didn't look perfect, right? Then the art director, hypothetical art director would be like, well, then the model's wrong if it didn't match this pose. But if you get that approval first, it's much easier to neutralize it, and then they don't have questions about the neutral version. So that's kind of what I'm choosing to do. All right. But like, I mean, if you're confident in your workflow to go about it differently, like, I mean, yeah, absolutely go for it. But then isn't it too hard to put it in neutral pose to rig it? Or after sculpting version, do you sculpt another version in neutral? Yeah, that's what it's going to be. This is a difficult task, but it is a difficult workflow, but it is all in honor of the concept, right? I'm trying to have the utmost respect for the concept because the concept is the actual design, and I'm trying to fully, authentically represent that in my sculpture. And so that's why I'm being a little more tedious by sculpting it in pose, and then I'm going to neutralize it. Now, when I neutralize it, well, what was that? I lost my train of thought. But when I neutralize it, like there will be some additional sculpting that I have to do, additional retopology and stuff. But it's just going to be more authentic to the character. That's kind of the whole reason. To get the person that has to approve of you back. Yeah, and that is, admittedly, like that is my context for sharing this workflow. I know it's different for all of you. A lot of you might be thinking, well, I don't have an art director. I'm my own art director. And so this context isn't entirely intuitive in that sense, but for, you know, like I tend to teach as though the people listening want professional level skills. And this is definitely what I had to do professionally. So that's why I'm teaching in that context. And I understand there might be some disconnect about that context, depending on why you guys are watching and what you want to do with your character art. So I do apologize for the disconnect. But right now I'm just going to start building out. I switched to my inflate brush because clay strips was being a little funky. I switched to my inflate brush to start building out the torso to make it much more like our art, because that was the biggest problem area. I'm just trying to keep it broad. And okay, so also at this point, what I find helpful is to make this window a 3D view and set up that image as my, where is it? Background image, add image. What time is it? 3:30. And John done. Okay, so now I've set up the camera over here. And that way I can always keep this up, but I don't have to look at it over here in the big 3D view. And that's going to be helpful for me because I can, you know, work on the torso from various angles over here and then judge its, you know, modification over against the art. That's kind of why I'm doing this. Yeah, just using my inflate brush. I think maybe my shoulders, I know now my shoulders are way too thin. You know, too narrow. They need to be more broad. And so what I might do is actually do that in edit mode. Just grow the selection of my arm. This is something that would have been easier to do with skin modifier still intact. Just trying to isolate, well, let's do it with my, there we go. Get a better selection and then enable proportional editing. I'm just going to move that with my mouse. Woo! Try that again. Let's also use sharp fall off. There we go. And as I move it this way, it's going to broaden the shoulder, but not break the orientation with the art over there. Okay, so the shoulders are a little bit more broad. That's going to help us. Do I have symmetry on? Yes. Let's turn that off. Okay, let's see how it's already looking much better over here. But having the character over top of the artwork is, you know, once I cover it, like I don't see it anymore, and so I kind of need to see it. So maybe let's try switching the background images to be in the front versus the back. There we go, that's better. Also, another thing I like to do, if we leave it at the back, we can set up our layers so that the second layer is active. All right, so when the second layer is active by itself, we don't see the sculpture, but we do see the artwork. And then the hotkey to enable all layers is the little tilde key, which is to the left of the 1 above the tab key. So I can just press that button to quickly on and off see what our sculpture looks like atop the image. So this also tells me that the torso needs to be thickened up. Man, I will say that this pose is a lot more complex, and you can hear me clicking. You can tell I'm sculpting with my mouse. It's much more precise to do with the mouse than moving with the brush, with a pen and tablet. And now I'm even inflating with the mouse. Sure, that can't be unannoying hearing all those clicks. Yeah, I need to switch back to the pen. And my scene is set up a little bit better now for sculpting, according to the art. We need to give him a bit of a gluteus maximus. He has nothing right now. And that's just because we know about that a butt needs to exist. The art is not telling me that at all. I just know. All right. Let's continue trying to get our proportions right. Now I can see that the hip needs to be brought out. And if this really becomes a problem, like, you know, moving the hand, I was moving the hand as I was moving the hip. You can see that that's happening. We can hide this stuff. I always forget how. B box mask. Let's do that. Nope, not mask. Oh, yeah. Hide bounding box is H. Yeah, so I can just hide it like that. Do it again. And then modify these by themselves. So that's, you know, sculpting it in pose. It's just a different way to approach it, right? You have to, you just have to use your hiding better, I guess, than usual. You don't have to hide too much when you're doing a neutral pose. All right, let me check the chat, see if you guys are asking anything that I need to be answering. All right, I don't think so. Let's see, I can also hear the tablet stroke sometimes. So it sounds like maybe no matter what I do, there's potential annoying sounds, tablet or mouse. But I don't know. I get the impression that like there's some of you guys like want to be mouse sculptors, and I mean that's like go for it. You know, like start the mouse sculpting revolution. I totally approve of that. It's not my preference, but I mean, that's the beauty of life. A lot of times it's just having the preference and doing what works for you. But yeah, that would be pretty sweet if a mouse sculpting revolution started here. I would approve of that big time. All right, let's start. Still, like my legs are just a little too thin. It must have happened when I added more subdivision levels. And I might need to go down to like 5 as I make these tweaks because I'm so far away from the sculpture. Using my crease brush, I'm just going to crease around the knee area a little bit. Ugh, maybe I should just stick with 10. All right, so let's start to create more of the feet shapes, because right now they're just floppy and they don't look anything like feet. I'm just going to start by increasing their volume. Smoothing them out, and then from the bottom I'm going to start to flatten them. Okay, Control 7. We'll use my flatten brush. And by the way, a fun fact about me, I think I've said this before on a stream, but why not say it again? And that did not work. First, I think I need to enable front faces only. Yeah. And then with the Shift-C crease brush, it's going to pull the heel out and tighter. All right, so now we've got more of a foot shape. We're getting there. Oh, but the fun fact I was going to share is that if I obsess over any one area of the body, it's usually the foot. And I don't really, I want to say it goes back to when I was a kid. I had an obsession with Superman. And, well, superheroes in general, but especially Superman. And so when he flew, I loved the fact that his toes were pointed. Loved that. And when I drew Superman, I spent way longer on the pointed toes. My mom could tell you that I would erase holes in the paper till I got his toes perfect. So that follows with me to this day. Like, I really need to get the feet looking good. And that's off to a better start. It's looking more foot-like, and I kind of need to do the same thing over here. But hopefully you found that fact fun and a little weird, because I think it is. And so we've got about 20 minutes. I'll cap it at 2 hours. I mean, I usually do an hour and a half, but this class, I feel like the lectures have taken longer. And so I will cap it at 2 hours, but it's not going to be enough to get this obviously finished. And part of the default curve here for the grab brush, I think is bad, and I say this every time, but I take the curve and I move it up, that upper point, almost to the corner, and that makes for a much more intuitive, or if you're coming from ZBrush, a much more ZBrush-like behavior from the grab brush. A good pointed toe can reduce the drag coefficient. Thanks for trying to help me have a reason for liking the toes so much. I do appreciate that. You guys are awesome, an awesome bunch of people. I look forward every Tuesday to hanging out with you guys. And as casual as we are now, like, it really does feel like a hangout. I hope you guys are learning and you're not just humoring me by being here. All right, so I've got the foot shaped a little better. Let me flatten it out. Control 7 and 5 to go into orthographic. All right. Starting to make some progress. It's starting to look like a character. I'm sorry that it's not gonna be super progressed. Oh. No, I think that's right. I was wondering if kind of the whole body needed to be pushed backward, but no, that would just throw him off. I think this is right. Let's see. Yeah, absolutely. You said thank you for doing this. Absolutely. I love it when I get an impression that you guys are learning. I get signs that suggest you guys are learning, and the fact that this is live and we get to interact together, and I get to answer questions that I know are applicable rather than hypothetically applicable when I record training. Yeah, all that means I love doing these, and as long as you guys are learning, I plan to do these for a long time. All right, just trying to bulk out the chest, again, to match those proportions. And it's starting to get to the point where I'm starting to wonder if the artwork, this is a problem that comes from 2D artwork, if the artwork is like cheating, right? Where you can cheat things in 2D that you cannot cheat in 3D. And I'm wondering if some of the body, especially the torso, is causing that. Like this big bump, let me turn off the artwork. This bump right here, it's a shoulder blade, I'm pretty certain, but like that looks a little bit extreme if you ask me. And I wonder if I'll be able to hit that and be authentic to that and it still look okay in 3D. I'm starting to be skeptical that no, I won't be able to do that. But let's try cutting in a big shoulder blade here. Do it to the other side as well. Yeah, I just don't know about that. It's getting closer to the artwork, but I might have to make a concession. Let's try and get a little bit, let's finish up the sculpt, I think, trying to get a little bit of his head worked out. I'm going to start by just giving him a muzzle as like a reference point. That's one of the hardest parts about getting started with the head is figuring out a reference point. I'm just going to use the snake hook brush, which I probably should have done from the beginning. Pull that out. Ooh. Okay, needs to be pointed down a bit more. It looks like we've had about 40 people watching this whole time, so thanks for sticking around. The consistency is I guess hopefully a sign that you guys have been entertained / you've been learning. So yeah, thanks for sticking around for right now, an hour and 45 minutes. But I'll try and wrap it up. So just trying to get the head to look a little better. Work on the neck a little bit. Just get some of the geometry to resemble these shapes more. Looks like a duck man. Yeah, seriously. This is we gotta get away from Duckman. We cannot end the stream today having it look like Duckman. So that's the new goal. Free Fox Face from being Duckman. Liberate him. Man, I keep feeling like the head is big, but then I look at the art and it's just not big enough. So let's maybe adding the hair. Will that help? Interesting. Maybe it's just not rotated correctly. Let's tab into edit mode because we can easily do that. select his neck area, Shift S, cursor to selected. Just trying to get a central point around his neck. Oh, whoops. Let's try that again without the part of the duck bill. Cursor to selected. There we go. Now the cursor's in the center of the head. Gives me a point of rotation, an axis of rotation, a pivot of rotation. And we'll use the 3D cursor and rotate the head more like this. And, oops. There we go. That's going to be much better oriented now. All right. Ooh, there's a little bit of fox face coming back. In wireframe, it looks like Black Panther. That's awesome. Pretty unintentional. Was that a good movie? Have you guys seen Black Panther? I don't get out to the movies, unfortunately, as much as I used to. But, you know, obviously heard the hype around it, so I'm curious if you guys would recommend it. His head's just not big enough. Oh, hey, I just realized, like, I changed... No, maybe I didn't. I thought I was sculpting and changed the topology, and it kept my selection, but maybe I didn't actually change the topology. This time I'm going to do the cursor to the center of the head mass, and let's scale up. There we go. It's looking better. Now let's buff up the arm, because he kind of got to be twig-armed along the way. 10 out of 10 for Black Panther, I assume, yeah. I got bored watching it, not my favorite Marvel one. Okay, Black Panther was great. Let me look through some more of these. Yeah, it looks better with hair. Yeah, okay, the Fox character, yeah. There should be a Warriors remake with these characters. Oh, cool. Like, are you talking about the Battered Bunnies versus the Canines? Kind of do a Warriors remake? That's a cool idea. Okay, yeah, it sounds like the general consensus. Omar was a little bored with it. The sculpting is so much more easier to get a better result. And then there's a question, easier than what? I think, so with, I think, I might be wrong, but like organic modeling is much easier to do with sculpting. It's much more artistically intuitive with sculpting compared to polygon modeling. That is much less intuitive. That's certainly my opinion. And it's one that I kind of promote in my training to, if you want to do organics, to do that with sculpting. But I think that's what he's speaking to. All right, bulked up the arm. Yeah, it's pretty close, it looks like. Oh, but look, his shoulder needs to come like way far this way. Like where the actual, right here, where the seam of his jacket is. Apparently, my sculpture, it's too far backward. So I'm supposed to bring it forward like this. Oh, dude, his shoulder's broken at that point. Yeah. So the 3D has kind of revealed, in my opinion, that the shoulder is not placed properly, not placed anatomically plausibly in the artwork. And so I am going to bring the shoulder a little bit back just to make more sense in 3D rather than what it is in 2D. So yeah, I definitely don't feel like I can break it anymore. Getting points like, whose line is it anyway? Oh, that's great. I watched that show over the holiday break, so like December, and was cracking up. It was the first time I'd seen it in probably a decade, if not long. Oh, longer than a decade actually. All right, so I forgot that I had kind of hidden that arm. And so I've brought it back. I brought it back. And yeah, I'm kind of feeling happy at this point. We started with that somewhat busted, not busted, but the incomplete skin modifier, and we did not get where I wanted to with it. But now we have gotten to a place that I can see the character's pose coming out. And so for just an hour of working, I'm pretty happy. And so I'm going to save it and then kind of walk away and revisit this tomorrow. And I will post in the community thread along with you guys, at the end of the week to show you what my sculpture is like at the end, because I'm very much doing this alongside with you. I haven't like pre-made this character, so yeah, you'll see me post in the community thread. I'll be there if you have questions, and yeah, just try and get the story, the background story, background 3 paragraphs of your character, and finish your concept sculpt by the end of day